New York City, One World Trade Center, boardroom on the 85th floor where billion-dollar destinies were decided. Michael Brooks, 35, widowed janitor of the building, was fixing the HVAC system during a crucial $800 million negotiation. His 8-year-old daughter, Emma, had accompanied him because school was closed. When the lead interpreter collapsed from a cardiac event, panic filled the room packed with Japanese, Russian, Chinese, and Saudi investors. That's when little Emma, sitting invisible in a corner wearing her faded dress, stood up and in a crystal-clear voice offered to help. What followed shattered every assumption about social class and talent. The child translated perfectly in 9 languages, saving the deal. But when she examined the documents on the table and revealed that the foreign versions of the contract contained hidden fraudulent clauses, the entire room froze. Victoria Sterling, the most feared CEO in America, nearly choked on her $500 Dom Perignon. The janitor everyone ignored had raised a genius, and the truth that would emerge was even more staggering. The day that would forever transform Michael Brooks and his daughter Emma's destiny began like every other for the past 5 years. At 6 in the morning, in their cramped kitchen in the Bronx, Michael prepared the same breakfast they'd had for months. Instant oatmeal and generic brand Pop-Tarts, $1.50 at the discount store, all he could afford on a janitor's salary. One World Trade Center rose into the Manhattan sky like a monument to American capitalism, glass and steel piercing the clouds. Michael knew every corner of it, every stain on the Italian marble, every quirk of the sophisticated systems. He was invisible as a ghost among the executives in Tom Ford suits, rushing to meetings where million-dollar fates were decided, while he polished brass fixtures and fixed breakdowns. That October morning, a water main break had closed Emma's public school in the South Bronx. Having no one to watch her, Michael had brought her to work, hiding her in the maintenance room with her books. But these weren't ordinary books for an 8-year-old. They were dictionaries, grammar guides, texts in alphabets Michael himself struggled to recognize. Arabic, Cyrillic, Chinese, and Japanese characters mixed on pages the little girl devoured with insatiable hunger. Emma's gift for languages had manifested early. Her mother, Layla, a Syrian refugee with a doctorate in computational linguistics, reduced to cleaning offices, had started teaching her Arabic and French when she was barely 3. Before dying of aggressive lymphoma, Layla had transmitted to her daughter not just the languages she knew, but above all the thirst for knowledge, the ability to see each language as a key to unlock worlds. At 11 that fateful morning, the emergency phone in the maintenance room rang with unusual urgency. The HVAC in the main boardroom had failed during the year's most important negotiation. Tech America was merging with an international consortium. Investors had flown from Tokyo, Moscow, Riyadh, and Beijing for this meeting that would redefine the global tech market. Michael grabbed his toolbox and headed to the 85th floor. Emma, with the curiosity typical of brilliant children, followed silently, slipping like a shadow behind her father's broad frame. The boardroom was a temple of corporate luxury. A $200,000 crystal conference table, leather chairs that cost what Michael made in a year, a breathtaking view of Manhattan producing and consuming wealth. At the center of this universe reigned Victoria Sterling, 43 years of power condensed into a cream-colored Armani suit. Her rise in the tech world was legendary. Daughter of a bankrupted steelworker from Pittsburgh, she'd built an empire by crushing anyone in her path. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and smile sharp as a blade were the last things competitors saw before being annihilated. While Michael worked on the climate control unit trying to remain invisible, drama erupted. The lead interpreter, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s, suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. His face turned blue, his breathing stopped. Heart attack. In the chaos that followed, with someone attempting CPR and others calling 911, the devastating truth emerged. Without an interpreter, the $800 million deal was evaporating. Foreign investors spoke agitatedly in their languages. No one understood anyone. Years of negotiations crumbling in a babel of incomprehension. It was at that moment of absolute panic that Emma rose from her corner. Her small voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. She simply said she could help, in English so pure it seemed impossible, coming from a child wearing thrift store clothes. The Japanese investor, Yamamoto-san, made a sarcastic comment in his language, clearly convinced this was a bad joke. Emma's response in perfect Japanese, with the most sophisticated forms of politeness and impeccable intonation, nearly made him fall from his chair. The child continued, addressing the Russian investor in fluent Russian that sounded like that of an educated Muscovite, then switched to classical Arabic for the Saudi prince, then to Mandarin for the Shanghai entrepreneur. Within minutes, an 8-year-old in a faded dress had taken control of a room where the fates of thousands of jobs were being decided. She wasn't simply translating, she grasped cultural nuances, diplomatic subtexts, even the veiled threats behind courtesy smiles. Victoria Sterling had built her empire on the ability to read people like open books, but this child was an enigma that defied all her certainties. Emma didn't just translate with surgical precision, she seemed to understand power dynamics, hidden strategies, the unspoken that constituted the real language of international business. The crucial moment came when the child approached the table and pointed to documents scattered on the crystal surface. Her eyes scanned rapidly between different versions of the contract, her brain processing information in parallel like a quantum computer. Her face darkened, an expression of concern that seemed out of place on such young features. With devastating calm, Emma revealed the truth. The Chinese version of the contract was completely different from the English one. Where the English text guaranteed equal partnership, the Mandarin established progressive acquisition with total control after 24 months. Employment protection clauses present in the English version were replaced in Chinese with restructuring plans that would eliminate 70% of staff. Victoria's blood froze in her veins as Emma continued her relentless analysis. The Arabic version contained unauthorized technology transfers. The Russian one included non-compete clauses that would destroy Tech America in Eastern Europe. It was a conspiracy orchestrated with surgical precision, and someone inside the company had sold their soul to the highest bidder. The Chinese investor, Chen Wei, maintained an impassive expression as his plan collapsed, but a nervous tick at the corner of his eye betrayed his agitation. Members of Tech America's legal team suddenly found the pattern of the Persian rug beneath their feet fascinating. Michael watched the scene paralyzed, the wrench forgotten in his hand. His daughter, the same child who colored books in the evening while he cooked mac and cheese from a box, had just saved an American company from the most sophisticated hostile takeover ever attempted. The janitor everyone ignored had raised a genius who saw through lies in any language they were told. Victoria took control with the ruthless efficiency that had made her legendary. Within minutes, she'd fired 3 members of her legal team, called security, ordered all documents seized. The foreign investors tried to minimize, to talk about misunderstandings, translation errors. But with Emma decoding every word, every attempt at justification dissolved like snow in sunlight. The investigation that followed revealed a conspiracy that had been going on for months. Chen Wei was leading a Chinese government operation to illegally acquire Western technologies. He'd bribed Tech America's chief legal officer with the promise of a CEO position in the new structure and $15 million in a Swiss account. As security and then the FBI took away the culprits, Victoria approached Emma. The child was already returning to her corner, picking up her books as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just saved 5,000 jobs and preserved American technological sovereignty. The CEO knelt before the child, a gesture no one had ever seen her make. She wanted to know how such a young creature could master languages that diplomats studied for decades without ever truly understanding them. Emma's answer revealed a story of genius born from tragedy and cultivated in poverty. Her mother, Layla, before dying 3 years earlier, had taught her Arabic, French, and formal English. But above all, she'd transmitted a method. Every language was a code, and once the pattern was understood, the rest followed naturally. Russian she'd learned from Mr. Dmitri, who ran the bodega downstairs and lent her old Soviet books in exchange for help with accounting. Japanese from Mrs. Nakamura on the 3rd floor, who gave her lessons in exchange for company and help with groceries. Mandarin had come through free YouTube videos, watched on a broken tablet Michael had salvaged from the trash and repaired. German, Spanish, and Portuguese from university textbooks she recovered from dumpsters near Columbia. 9 languages absorbed like a sponge absorbs water, guided by a thirst for knowledge that poverty had only intensified. That evening, Victoria Sterling did something unthinkable for a woman of her position. She followed a janitor to his home. The Uber dropped her in front of a rundown building in the South Bronx, one of those structures real estate agents pretended didn't exist. Peeling stairs, smell of mold, graffiti covering older graffiti. Michael's apartment on the 5th floor with no working elevator was clean but desperately poor. Furniture salvaged from the street, repaired and repainted. A bookshelf built from boards and cinder blocks, overflowing with volumes in every imaginable language. The walls were covered with maps, alphabets, educational posters, all salvaged material restored with obsessive care. It was the framed diploma on the wall that caught Victoria's attention. Aerospace Engineering, MIT, Michael Brooks, Summa Cum Laude. The janitor who cleaned her bathrooms had been one of the most brilliant engineers of his generation. The story emerged as Emma served tea in chipped cups, with the grace of a little hostess. Michael had worked for SpaceX, designed satellite navigation systems now orbiting above their heads. Then he'd met Layla, a Syrian refugee with a doctorate serving lattes to survive. The love had been immediate and total. Marriage.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Emma's birth. 2 years of perfect happiness. Then the diagnosis of aggressive lymphoma for Layla. Experimental treatments not covered by insurance cost fortunes. Michael had sold everything. Condo, car, investments. He'd gone $400,000 into debt. He'd quit his job to care for Layla 24 hours a day. She died anyway, leaving him a widower with a 5-year-old and debts that would crush him for decades. No aerospace company would hire an engineer who'd been out of the field for 2 years, overqualified for normal jobs, too outdated to return to high-tech. The janitor position was the only one he'd found. $1,800 a month, enough for rent, food, and a few used books for Emma. Victoria listened, feeling something she'd thought dead for years awakening in her chest. Shame. She, who boasted of being self-made, had never known this kind of poverty, the kind that forces you to choose between medicine and books, between heating and school supplies. She watched Emma proudly showing her notebooks, pages covered with characters in every known alphabet, simultaneous translation exercises that would challenge professional interpreters. When Victoria asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, the answer broke her heart. The child wanted to be a janitor, like Daddy, so she could keep reading the foreign newspapers left in offices. The next day, Michael was summoned to the 85th floor. He found not just the complete board of directors, but also figures he recognized from the news. The Secretary of Education, the President of Columbia University, the British Ambassador, even representatives from the United Nations. Victoria presented her proposal with the same precision she conducted billion-dollar acquisitions. Emma was a national treasure, a generational talent that couldn't be wasted. The best schools in the world would fight over such a mind. Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire had already offered a full scholarship worth $500,000. Michael's face crumbled at the thought of separating from Emma. She was all he had left of Layla, his only reason to get up each morning. But it was Emma herself who responded, switching with disarming ease from French to address the Swiss boarding school representative, to German for the EU delegate, to Japanese for the international school representative. The child thanked them for the offers, but declared she would never leave her father. He'd sacrificed everything for her and Mom. She wouldn't abandon him for any school in the world, however prestigious. The British ambassador proposed an alternative. Cambridge University had a special program for child prodigies. They could offer positions for both, Michael as a research engineer, Emma in their accelerated education program. But when Michael showed his debt documents, $400,000 chaining him to America, the British dream evaporated. Victoria then did something that shocked everyone present. With one call to her personal accountant, she arranged immediate payment of all Michael's debts from her private account. When the man tried to protest, she silenced him with an imperious gesture that brooked no argument. But the real proposal was yet to come. Victoria didn't want Michael and Emma to leave America. She offered Michael the position of Chief Technology Officer at Tech America, a role requiring exactly his engineering expertise. Salary: $400,000 a year plus bonuses. Emma would attend the United Nations International School in Manhattan with a full scholarship, and would become the youngest linguistic consultant in the company's history. Emma's compensation would be symbolic until she came of age, but a $3 million trust fund would guarantee whatever university path she wished to pursue. In exchange, 3 afternoons a week, she would assist with translations and international negotiations. Father and daughter looked at each other. No words were needed. In any of the 9 languages Emma spoke, they embraced crying as their life changed in an instant. The invisible janitor and the child prodigy had just received a second chance. 6 months later, Michael and Emma's life was unrecognizable. They lived in a bright apartment on the Upper West Side. Emma amazed teachers from around the world at the UN International School. Michael led a team of 80 engineers protecting Tech America's digital secrets. During an international tech summit in New York, an even more staggering truth emerged. Chen Wei, in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealed that the Tech America takeover attempt was part of a larger operation orchestrated by Cybercore, the Silicon Valley giant led by James Harrison. Harrison was in New York for the summit and wanted to meet the child who'd foiled a plan years in the making. The meeting took place on neutral ground, a Michelin-starred restaurant near Central Park. The American arrived convinced he could buy or intimidate anyone, accustomed as he was to crushing every obstacle. But when Emma addressed him in perfect California English with a Bay Area accent, then switched to the Texas drawl upon recognizing his Houston origins, the man understood he was facing something completely unexpected. The child didn't just speak languages. She understood cultures, psychologies, power games. Harrison made his move. $20 million to secure Emma's future services. The child's response, given in Russian because she knew Harrison understood it from his years in Moscow, chilled him. Emma had discovered all his illegal secrets while studying online documents to practice languages. Payment accounts, bribes to politicians, blackmail of senators. If he tried again to harm Tech America or her new family, she'd send everything to the New York Times. The man thought it was a bluff until Emma showed him on Michael's phone the draft of an email with attached documents Harrison believed destroyed years ago. The child had found them on Russian servers while practicing Cyrillic, hidden in the dark web where her polyglot mind navigated like a fish in water. James Harrison, one of the most powerful men in global tech, was checkmated by an 8.5-year-old. He left New York that night, and Cybercore never bothered Tech America again. Only later, on the ride home through Manhattan rain, did Emma reveal to her father the final secret. Layla hadn't been just a refugee linguist. She'd been one of the Middle East's most brilliant hackers, forced to flee after breaching Syrian regime servers. Before dying, she'd transmitted to Emma not just languages, but also the ability to decipher digital codes, find hidden information, protect those she loved in the virtual world, as in the real one. The 9 languages were just the visible surface of a much deeper talent. Emma had inherited from her mother the ability to decode any communication system, from her father, the mathematical mind, to understand it. She was a human computer raised in poverty, forged by pain, but guided by love. 2 years later, Emma was 10 years old and spoke 13 languages. She'd become a silent legend in the international corporate world, the child who solved crises as easily as other children solved puzzles. The culminating moment came during the World Economic Forum in New York. A misunderstanding in official translations was degenerating into a major diplomatic incident. Chinese accusing Americans of espionage, Russians threatening retaliation, Gulf states talking about blocking trillion-dollar investments. Years of negotiations were collapsing due to linguistic misunderstandings hiding political agendas. Emma sat at the back of the hall, theoretically invisible. But when she saw the situation precipitating toward a crisis that could destabilize the global economy, she stood and walked toward the podium. Security tried to stop her, but Victoria, present as a keynote speaker, waved them off. In 20 minutes, a 10-year-old in a simple blue dress had resolved an international crisis. Speaking in 13 different languages, she'd clarified misunderstandings, exposed manipulations, proposed solutions everyone could accept without losing face. But she'd done more. She'd proposed a verified translation system based on AI and supervised by human experts to prevent future crises. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. The UN Secretary-General personally approached to offer Michael and Emma positions in Geneva. The child would become the youngest linguistic consultant in United Nations history. Emma thanked him in French so perfect, the Secretary-General, born in Paris, was stunned. But she declined the offer. New York was their home. Here lay Mom Layla in a Queens cemetery. Here Michael had found redemption. Here Victoria had become the family they'd never had. And above all, here Emma had started her real project. With her trust fund and Victoria's support, she'd opened a free school for immigrant children in the South Bronx, right where she'd grown up. 70 Syrian, Ukrainian, Chinese, African children were learning not just English, but other languages too. Emma had understood that multilingualism wasn't a luxury for the elite, but a human right, a bridge to opportunities that poverty otherwise denied. The last scene New York remembers of this story happened when the president visited the school. But the real surprise was different. Chen Wei, the man who'd tried to destroy Tech America, showed up with his 6-year-old daughter. The child was dyslexic in Chinese, but seemed to understand foreign languages better. He'd heard about Emma's method. Could he bring his daughter? Emma knelt before the terrified child and spoke to her in simplified Mandarin, telling her that being different wasn't a weakness, but a superpower waiting to be discovered. The little girl smiled for the first time in months. Emma took her hand and led her to class, where 30 other special children were learning that the world had infinite doors, and they were building keys to open them all. Victoria watched from the window of her new office above the school. She'd made billions in her career, but her greatest success had been stopping to listen to a child in a faded dress who'd dared say she could help in a room where adults were failing. Michael watched his daughter teach, surrounded by children hanging on her every word as she switched from language to language like a musician playing an impossible symphony. Layla would have been proud. The janitor had become guardian of digital secrets. The poor child had become a bridge between worlds. Pain had transformed into hope for hundreds of other invisible children. The last sentence Emma spoke that day, translated simultaneously into 13 languages, became the motto engraved at the school entrance. Words are bridges. The more languages you speak, the more bridges you can build. And with enough bridges, no one remains isolated on an island. The miracle wasn't that a child spoke 9 languages. The miracle was that a widowed janitor had transformed tragedy into triumph, that poverty had forged genius instead of extinguishing it, that love had conquered despair. And it all began when a small voice dared to rise in the silence of the powerful to say 3 simple words: I can help. Hit like if you believe genius knows no social class. Comment with the moment that touched you most. Share with those who need to know that the greatest talents often hide in the most unlikely places. Subscribe for more stories that demonstrate how intelligence and love can change the world.